It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up.
Great to be back at GreenTech Festival. For me, it's the third time in a row. As we heard, my name is Lukas. I'm from Berlin. We do develop future food products here in Berlin. And I do have the honor to moderate this panel. We want to touch upon the future of food and more precisely on the futures of the dairy and meat industries, which maybe most of you know account for big proportion of greenhouse gas emissions. And I mean, it's quite clear that we do have to promote change in that area and all of the areas. Maybe you also know that in the society, in the political arena, this has become quite controversial and polarizing debate as well. And it seems to be there's a yes or no choice between like consuming animal products or not. If you are in this industry, you will understand quite quickly that the answer might be not so easy. And this is more or less what we want to discuss now. I have the honor to introduce to you Cora, who's the business developer at Volta GreenTech from Sweden. Then we have Sandra Wilde from Formo here from Berlin. And we do have Dosch, who is the head of public affairs at Tönnies. And we do have Gerrit Feuerriegel, who is the founder of Bioshyft. I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and maybe you start with your organization. So what does your organization like in how what's the way you contribute to the future of food, and what is your personal role in this? So maybe Cora, you start.
Happily. Hopefully that's a bit better. So Volta GreenTech is working with methane reducing additives. So as you said very nicely, Lukas, beef and dairy is responsible for a huge amount of emissions. To put it in a bit more context, by 2030, a Nature paper estimated that it would be as much as 50% of the emissions from food are from beef and dairy. And a very large proportion of those come from enteric methane. So about 40 to 50% of those emissions come from enteric methane. So what we do as a company is we produce additives that reduce the methane that cows burp out. And we previously worked with seaweed, but as we came out with in a press release recently, we are actually working with a new additive now that's also highly effective. And my background personally is in chemistry and environmental policy. I work as a business developer at Volta GreenTech, and as a startup that involves lots of things, some events, some working with policy, and some working with our customers, who are beef and dairy companies. But it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Sandra.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Sandra, I'm from Formo. Formo is a startup here based in Berlin, and we are using fermentation to produce protein. In fact, we are using microorganisms to produce dairy proteins. So instead of having a macroorganism like a cow, we are using microorganisms which are 10 times more efficient in producing milk proteins. And through this, we tackle the whole problem, which is, livestock is causing more than 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions of the whole food sector, so huge thing. And you can make the livestock production more sustainable, like Cora said, or you can also reduce it. We want to reduce this overconsumption, overproduction of animal-based food and focus on dairy and make dairy really alternatives super tasty to equal price. This is our mission.
Thomas.
Well, my name is Thomas. My personal background, I'm a farmer and I studied agricultural economics. I built up a huge Bioland farm with lots of animals, and I also served as president for Bioland for 12 years, which is the biggest organic farmers association in Germany. And I also served as a director of a department in an agricultural ministry. So I know, associations, administration and ministry, and I'm working for Tönnies for 4 years now, so I also know how business works. I decided to go to Tönnies because I'm sure that the big companies have to adapt, have to change, have to deal with the actual problems like animal welfare and the climate issue. And I'm convinced that the impact of the big companies is too important to leave it set aside. So that's why we're dealing with it. Personally, I'm convinced of that we need animals in a sustainable agriculture in terms of a circle system with plants and animals and so on. So that's my background.
That's great. So I'm sure we come to the role of animals, but maybe Gerrit, you close the intro round.
Thanks. I'm the founder of Bioshyft, and my background is I used to work for 2 fermentation companies beforehand, and I planned industry parks for government, circular industry parks for novel food, alternative meat, dairy, and similar products, but also for alternative material solutions. And based on this knowledge, I thought we do have a lot of solutions in the bioeconomy, especially around food solutions, which are already present. We just have to find them and then to deploy them. And this was the idea for Bioshyft. Bioshyft is a platform to find solutions, either startups, technologies, or intermediate products in the bioeconomy. And in the bioeconomy, the food sector has a major part. And if we're looking for raw materials, for processing technologies, or for novel packaging materials, fermentation-based products and similar, Bioshyft is the place to find these. And then we also help to deploy them. In a way that we form teams to tackle problems, to build facilities, to facilitate market entries and optimize the supply chain. Because it's great to find solutions, but it's even better to implement them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I want to, maybe this is a little bit like the elephant in the room, Thomas, because we're seeing that like plant-based products are growing double-digit every year, at least in Germany. Meat consumption is declining. Like, is that alone setting your business under pressure already, or is it like, are you acting freely right now?
That's absolutely no issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends. What do you double from which base on?
Mm-hmm. Yes, right.
So the share of plant-based products is quite small. We also invested in plant-based products. That's not the issue. We're doing both. And we do what we can, but it's not really that important. Meat consumption depends more on the price elasticity than the comparison between plant-based and meat.
Okay, we do see like Formo is one example that we have like a next generation of products coming to the market. In this case, it's dairy, but there are similar companies who are doing that for meat and fish and stuff. Like. And you mentioned that you clearly see animal agriculture also with certain proportion in the future. Like, how exactly would you describe the future that you are anticipating as a company?
Well, if we look at only one food item and only look at the pressure on environment just in one dimension, like climate, I think we miss something. We also have to bear in mind problems about, let's say, distorting habitats by land use. We have fresh water use. We have the nitrogen and phosphor problem and so on. And if you compare and you take all this together, the pressure on environment is nearly the same if you compare human plant consumption and human animal production. Mm-hmm. So that it's not the solution just to shift from one to the other. It would be very complicated to explain how plants are linked with animals. But just ask yourself how your plants are fed. If you feed them with synthetic nitrogen and fertilizer produced with gas and ammonium, 60% came from Russia before the Ukraine war, then you are aware of that this is not the sustainable solution by getting rid of animals and taking natural or synthetic fertilizer instead of farm fertilizer.
Mm-hmm. May I jump in here?
Please, yeah, I wanted to ask you anyway. So how do you look at this, Sandra?
Yes, so we need to consider that more than 50% of our agricultural land is for livestock. Yes, it's for feed, and feed of livestock, right? So if we have less livestock, we also would need less fertilizers, because a lot of those fertilizers we need to produce the feed for the livestock. And this is also part of the game.
May I add? I think it's interesting because when I started to engage in the alternative protein sector and meat alternatives, one of the first companies who was interested in the topic was Bayer. And because they sell some of the pesticides, etc., and they had the big deal with Monsanto, and they were quite interested in the topic of meat alternatives, because one of the main assumptions for this big deal was that livestock is growing, and because we need more input, more plant-based input for the growing livestock sector, we need also more pesticides and fertilizer, etc. So it was a big deal also for the chemical companies. So I do understand that there's a ratio behind this. Yeah.
We got already like a hint, like given your reaction, like how does a company like Formo look at this? Like, are you like a vegan first company, or because I can imagine there's certain scale-up process that you are also anticipating. If you look in the future, like 10 years, what are you anticipating? What market split among animal, non-animal, plant-based?
Yeah, totally. So vegans are not our focus group. We really want to tackle the mainstream market. We really want to reach the average consumer. And for the average consumer, what is most important is taste and price. Right? So you need to have tasty, nice, delicious products to a comparable price as the animal-based products. And how we envision it, of course, the plant-based products, you said, the market is growing, but also the curve is now flattening, right? It's not as aggressively increasing as in the beginning. So we envision that there will be a further increase in plant-based, but then there are the new technologies like precision fermentation, but also others, biomass and cellular agriculture comes a bit later. But there are other new technologies which will enter the market in the coming years and also contribute and take a part of the share, right? So we see that there is a further growth, and maybe ideally 2030, the animal-based products in the dairy sector go down to 60%, and the rest is taken by plant-based and new technologies.
Okay, that's an interesting foresight. Maybe at least we can by now agree that we need animal products, but may differ in terms of if we need the animal for it or not. I want to ask you, Cora, because you are at you have an interesting perspective, as you are, one could argue you are helping to maintain the animal in the value chain with your technology. How are you pitching that to the public, or is it something, or are you also anticipating lower quantities of animals in the value chain?
It's a great question, and the company was founded by people who really wanted to do something about climate change. So it's a tough line to walk between thinking that we're supporting the livestock industry and maybe even expanding it somehow, and between drastically reducing emissions. But our perspective is, and we have a manifesto even on this on our website, that beef is going to continue to be consumed, dairy is going to continue to be consumed. There are a lot of very determined consumers out here. I mean, this is a GreenTech festival. We all care about the climate, but I would guess there's probably quite a lot of beef and dairy consumers in the audience. It is very hard to change how consumers behave. And what we know is that methane is a huge problem. We know that we need to cut methane rapidly over the next years, and one of the biggest contributions to the global methane output, about 30%, is enteric fermentation. And our additive cuts that by up to 90%. So we really want to scale this out. We recognize it might not be forever. There might be tools such as precision fermentation that are coming in the future. But for now, we need a solution. And we work with very forward-thinking beef and dairy companies who recognize their impact, and they want to do something about it. Really the change makers in that industry.
Thank you.
Well, nothing about feed additives to reduce methane, but nevertheless we have to differentiate between fossil methane and methane from cows, from ruminants. That makes a difference. Why? Because the methane went to CO2, and the CO2 is bound in the grassland again, fed by the cow. This is a circle. And in Europe, we have a reduction of ruminants last year, so we have a reduction within this circle of the amount. So fracking is a big problem, for example, in the US. And of course, feedlots are a big problem. So it's not an either or, and that's where I'm with you. We have to see how we optimize the system. And the whole system has to be efficient. For example, if I compare our diet in Germany, we have less plants in our diet than people, for example, in West Africa. But nevertheless, our CO2 emission by our diet is less than in West Africa, but even they eat more plants. Why is it like that? It has to do with the efficiency within the system. And that's where we are going to improve the system. And as you know, grassland is an important sink for CO2. How can you maintain grassland without making money out of it? You can make money out of it by feeding the grassland to ruminants. So this is also part of the system.
We are now entering the phase of the discussion where we have this systemic conversation, which is of course needed, but the problem is always like you change one variable and something at the very end changes, and no one really knows what the truth is and what the result will be. Of course, there is science going on, and but it's really hard to consider all the aspects. So, Gerrit, maybe looking at the startups that we have here, and also the big meat company, like in terms of system transformation, what would be the right first steps to do to really get the wheel running and actually also achieve the first successes in that sense?
I think, so first of all, I think it's good to quickly see what defines success, and for me we have to feed the whole planet in a sustainable, affordable and nutritious, healthy way. And so I think there's definitely a place for also livestock production, but if we look at the total number or quantity of livestock globally at the moment on the planet, it's far superior compared to humans, compared to any wildlife. So, so we have to think about what level of or what quantity of livestock is really sustainable for the planet, and what alternative technologies we have, which improve the conversion, so that we need less input for the same output. And I think for this we have a lot of startups around fermentation technologies, not just in the precision fermentation sector, but also across biomass fermentation, and also for alternatives to biofertilizer, biopesticides, by the way, for regenerative farming. So fermentation is a broad spectrum and a multiplicator technology. On the other hand, if we look at the systematic change, one component is less input for the same output. Another component is also that we look at regenerative farming as a topic in the agriculture space, but also as additional biomass sources. So algae, mycelium, CO2 as biomass source, so that we extend the bench and have more of this input to feed the population. On the other hand, also the topic of food waste. There are many startups here also in the hall looking at food waste and food waste reduction. And I think we have to look at many of these fields. And as a startup founder, I would, if I don't tackle one of these big issues, so food waste, conversion technologies, or the input factors, then I would question the model I'm working on, because these are the big levers from my perspective to really have an impact, and a strong impact. We have, as I said, just 30% food waste. We have a conversion which can be improved by fermentation technology quite a lot, or plant-based. And we have the input sources where we really need to extend the bench. If we only use or stick to the agricultural land we have, we are always limited. Also, if we use this agricultural land as feedstock for fermentation, this will be limited. So we need to find other feedstock sources beyond this. Right? Yeah,
but like if you imagine that there are a couple of companies who are really pioneering this vegan market, and then you have, of course, the incumbents who are on the animal side. Do you think we have even enough platforms or exchange opportunities for this systematic kind of perspective?
I think we have a lot of platforms where we can talk and debate. Like this platform is great here.
Yeah, this is a decent one. Yeah.
That's great. But I think what would be even more, or where I would like to push us, is to find solutions that work on a technical operational level, which means, for example, an example of the industry park where we had a nice closed circular system is fermentation also produces CO2 to some extent, right? Not that much compared to livestock, but it's CO2 production. And we put a microalgae facility next to a fermentation facility, and then the microalgae facility utilized the CO2 from the fermentation facility and sent the oxygen back to the fermentation facility. So there was a nice circle of CO2 and oxygen, and both of them were producing or could produce alternative proteins in the end. But you had a net zero effect. And these kind of models work on a micro technical level, and expanding this then on a global scale. I think this would be quite good to have these role model systems where we have technologies interacting with each other, because each startup has a certain focus, and it's essential for a startup to be focused, but these system changes work only in harmony if we put different technologies together, and this is exactly what we work on. So yeah.
And there's another example. I mean, you said it, we need to focus on certain things. So we also focus that our fermentation processes are running first and that we get great protein to an affordable price. But then in another step, we would also use side streams or food waste to feed our bacteria, so that we don't need agricultural land, that we don't need additional crops, but we can make use of side streams and food waste and be even more efficient, right? I mean, this is in the second step, but of course, there's many levers to make the food production more sustainable.
And fully agree. So the side streams, this is a great topic. And first of all, using the side streams of food waste or agriculture waste, if this is, and this is finite, so if this is done, then also some companies working out utilizing CO2 as feedstock, which is a far more larger quantity. The energy efficiency is not great. We need a lot of renewable energy to cope with this. But this way, we extend the agriculture land and the aquaculture system by a lot by using other feedstocks. And I think this is where we have to go. Otherwise, our planetary limitations will be just not ready for the growing population we have.
Yeah. Maybe, as we already have to close the round in a certain way, sorry for that, Thomas, maybe last question, like how are you as a company taking action? Like maybe you can give us some insight to that, because we do have the startups here. It sounds like you just have to call them and start collaborating.
I think we have to differentiate between the discussion in Germany and Europe, and if we look at the worldwide perspective. On the world level, if I believe to the figures of the FAO, I cannot influence the increase of animals worldwide. I cannot convince Xi Jinping how to deal with agriculture policy in China. That's matter of fact. So our task is to optimize animal production. That's what we do in climate issues. So we founded a platform in Germany and creating a method how to measure and to analyze and how to optimize CO2 emission, for example, and has to do with breeding, with feed, and so on. And we need side streams. That's classical agriculture to use it. You can only use 1/3 of a plant maximum for human consumption. The rest of it, you have to deal with it, and you can double calories per hectare by using stomachs of animals, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that's where we are working on. At the same time, we also have our unit cooperating with startups in the plant-based issue, because we want to make money. And that's why we sell that as well. But personally, my mission is to optimize animal production. I'm a farmer. As I'm an organic farmer, I need a diverse crop rotation. I need feed for animals. To have this crop rotation, I cannot only grow wheat, for example, and so on and so on. So I'm old school, and that's what we do in the company with my colleagues.
Yeah. Thank you all for being part of this controversial topic and this discussion. I hope we can continue the dialogue, and thank you all for listening and showing up in such a big round. Thank you very much.